because of that post-Christendom thing, it's forcing us to become much more nuanced and better at how we explain the gospel within those contexts.
Yeah, I hope so. And I think this is where the stuff from Faith for Exiles, that idea of resilient discipleship,
Yes.
comes in as well. That the resilient disciple is someone who is not just being at church because that's the right thing to do or the good thing to do,
Or even
it's just
hiding at church.
or hiding at church, or even it's just a good routine. But you're going to church as a strong matter of conviction and a deep understanding. This is what I do, and even when it's hard, and you have a understanding of yourself in which this makes sense. That this is what you're doing, and I think again that as the West becomes more and more secularized and Christianity is more and more weird and unusual, that helps solidify those who do it, because there's no longer any social privilege in being a Christian. It's actually now a social detriment.
Welcome back, everyone, to this Shock Absorber podcast, and it is awesome to have you along with us. And as I always like to say, it's awesome to have along whoever my guest is, and it's just Tim today. Hello.
Just Tim.
Just Tim.
That's what they called me at school.
Just Tim?
Just Tim.
Timberlake? Timberlake?
No, just, walk in the door and anyone important? No, it's just Tim.
Oh, it's just Tim. I'm wearing the same. We always talk about what we're wearing. We're wearing the same jumper today.
We are.
You may not be able to say it, but our pants are different colours.
Yeah. I've gone for the classic black and you've gone for the denim blue. Calvin Klein.
Yeah. Calvin Klein?
I don't know.
They're not Calvin Klein. And you're wearing Adidas shoes.
Yeah, I am.
I'm wearing Converse.
Yeah. I used to be all in on Vans, but I use a Adidas running app to track my runs.
Oh, okay.
And
so you've been sold.
Well, see, it sucked me into their ecosystem.
Yeah,
I sold out. Well, it was interesting. I picked Adidas out of all the possibilities because of the German background. So, part of it is just exploring myself and who I am as a German. And so, so I chose Adidas. But I've been sucked into their ecosystem, and potentially you earn points for every run that you do, and by doing little challenges and events and
so
blah, blah,
blah.
blah.
Gamified.
Yeah, it's a little bit gamified. But also if you buy Adidas product, you get points as well. Anyway, if you get to a certain level of the points, you get the app for free.
Oh.
And so it's really just an excuse to keep
free app.
Yeah.
Are you close?
I've done it for a number of years now. So I constantly get enough just to click over. But it does mean that now when I need to buy exercise gear or shoes, even casual shoes, my first protocol is, well, if I go through Adidas, partly I've got points that get me percentage off. And the other one is the more you purchase, the more points you get, and therefore you get the apps for free as well. So
it's a clever idea though.
Yeah, I mean, it all works out pretty well. So yeah, not being advertised by Adidas, but I'm quite enjoying the ecosystem that I'm currently in.
Have you heard the Adidas and Puma story? So
you have mentioned it a little bit. I tried to
have,
find a English version of it. Like I wanted to know if it had been written up in a book.
Maybe I'm wrong.
No, as in like there's stuff on it, but it's in German. So there's a lot of things as I try and explore particularities of German history that the best stuff that's written is in German, obviously, by Germans. And so, yes, sometimes it's difficult to find a English, take on that. So
yes, but I think the story I'm referring to is Adidas was started by Adi Dassler. His name was actually Adolf Dassler.
Right.
But now Adi
good
was
to change it.
Yeah, good idea to change it. But then he started with his brother, but then they had a falling out, so his brother went and started Puma.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. There's also the story of the 1954 World Cup.
Right.
Am I getting this right? Is it 1954? Yes, I think so. Where West Germany were playing what they call the Mighty Magyars. They reckon it's one of the most famous international football teams from Hungary. They had some of the best players in the world, and they kind of changed the face of football going forwards, but they never won anything.
Okay.
And so they actually, a couple of years before that World Cup final, they beat England 6-3 at Wembley.
Okay.
And that was a big shift in football because England considered themselves the best in the world, partly because they invented the game and there was a certain way they played. But what they call there's also a Danubian way, which is Austria was a really famous team in the 30s, and then Hungary in the 50s. And there was a culture around that area of Austro-Hungarian Empire of a thing of coffee houses where everyone would go to coffee houses and have a coffee and discuss football.
Yes.
So they think that was a big part of how it changed the game, of how they actually approached the game. It was much more passing football and tactical concepts that came from that time where England was very much like just boot it as far as you can and run really hard, and that'll be it.
Okay. Yeah.
So how do we get onto that? Oh,
I don't remember.
1954 World Cup.
Yes.
Is that West Germany won that, and it was meant to be won by. I might be getting this wrong. It could be the 1970. Anyway, it's West Germany versus either the Dutch in 1974 or 1954 against the Hungarians. I've got to get that right. But the story is that the Adidas came in and said, "Hey, you should try these boots at half time."
Yeah, right.
Because they were losing, and then
At
they went on to win the game. So that's the story. But there's also other things coming out that they probably use PEDs of some kind, like amphetamines of some kind.
Yeah, sure.
At halftime to change the game. So
the East Germans were very good at that.
East Germans, yes, but East Germany never really did that well at football. Or never really.
No, but the Olympics, they were very good at using sports enhancing drugs. Yes,
definitely. So. I think there's we talked about it a while ago about the Tour de France and that expose on British cycling.
Yes.
I think there is more PED use going on in sports than we know of.
Oh yeah, I'm sure of it. Yeah.
And even in sports that we seemingly don't have as much of a history in it, I think that's what seems to be coming out.
Yes.
Rumours.
Okay.
That it's happening. So thanks for wearing Adidas shoes.
No, that's
thanks
all right.
to the Adidas app.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Adidas. Who still sponsor the German football team?
They definitely do. I don't think they've ever had anyone else make the jersey.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. I've been trying to follow a little bit of German football, and I've worked out which one is my team.
Oh, who was your team?
So my family come originally from the southwest down in the Black Forest area.
Mm-hmm.
And so my son and I have worked out that the closest team that we would affiliate with is Freiburg.
Okay.
So
SC Freiburg.
SC Freiburg, yes. So we've been trying to follow SC Freiburg, and I can't remember how they're going at the moment. They had a really good win the first round, then they did not do as well the second round. They played...
Season's only started though, hasn't it?
They have, yeah. It was the second game against Bayern that they...
Well, that's a tough matchup.
Well, Bayern is the reigning champ. Well, not actually though. They did not win for the first time last year, but they
play at the Stade Europa Park.
That is correct. Yeah, that's a relatively new park that they got built. There is an interesting documentary on Freiburg on YouTube that I watched that had talked about the culture, because down in the southwest, they're much more influenced by Switzerland than they are by the rest of Germany. So actually, it's not a strong football area of Germany, and so they didn't take their football as seriously as other areas of Germany. But one of the things I really liked about them was that they did have this little football club, but they had an approach which was about let's just enjoy doing football together. Mm-hmm. And what has developed over a number of years is a strong loyalty within that club. So they often retain coaches, managers, players even for long periods of time.
Right.
And they also do not... They had one coach who took them in and out of the Bundesliga a couple of times. So the first time they went up into the Bundesliga, and then I can't remember how long they were there for, but then they got relegated back down again. And in a lot of European and English football, that would be your marching orders for the manager and the coach. It's like, right, that's it, you're out.
Yeah.
But their approach, because of their quite relaxed attitude towards the game, was, that's fine. Let's keep on going. Let's see how we go next year.
Yeah, right.
And so they kept their manager, kept their coach, and he then brought them back up, and he was very successful and champion. But I really liked there was this attitude in the whole town and around this team of just being quite relaxed. One of the original managers, is quoted there saying, don't ever try to get to the Bundesliga. Like, we don't want that. We just want to be really good and, low key here. And so there was this real kind of, competitive, but not taking themselves too seriously, that I really liked. It was quite a relaxed feel. So, I was like, I really resonate with the culture here of Freiburg, which is really interesting.
Well, it's interesting. It's one of my favourite. I'm just watching some of the highlights here of Bayern's 2-0 win over Freiburg. Harry Kane, the English striker, scoring a penalty, of course. One of my favourite things about football clubs that have been around for a long time is the standing they have in the community and what they mean to the community. And I like it that you are now researching an area, like your family's from there. Like you have this connection to the past and you can almost live that out through the football team. And that's what I really love. So I've said before, I'm a Liverpool supporter on this podcast, and I don't think you could be much further away from a football club than somewhere in England. Well, there's Freiburg missing a penalty. That's a bit unfortunate in the 96th minute. But there is I have a special connection with that club. Like when they won the title recently, I literally cried.
Right.
Because it was like I've supported this team for so long and we've been so close a number of times.
And what was the connection? What was the original connection with?
Well, it's interesting. When you're younger, you obviously kind of pick a team sometimes. Something just happens. And I was looking for a team. I remember I was probably about 14, I think. And I was looking for a team trying to decide, like I need to support a Premier League team. That's really what it was coming to. And the Premier League is so popular in Australia and all around the world. And I think I was just like, I need to support a team properly. And it's around that time, we talked even last week about that kind of self-determination aspect of as you become a teenager and older. Yeah. And it was just like, I like this team. They won the FA Cup against Arsenal with 2 goals from Michael Owen, I think. And then I'm like, that's the team I'm supporting.
Okay.
It was the year what they won a treble. So they won the UEFA Cup, the FA Cup, and I think at the time it was called the Carling Cup, which is now, the broad name would be a League Cup, because there's actually 2 cups in England at the top level. And I just from there on, and then I started reading about it and how there's a big thing with Liverpool. They were very much against like Thatcherism because it was a shipping town, so very, very working class suburb.
Yeah. Yep.
They built a lot of ships, for example, for World War II and any other times. And they had this thing where they would, like Liverpool were the most successful team in the late 70s, early 80s. Kind of how people see Manchester United now in the 90s. They were more success, and the other thing they had was a lot of success in Europe. So Liverpool has this seemingly downtrodden, they felt like they'd been left behind by Thatcherism. They had a similar thing to you saying with Freiburg, that they had a guy called Bill Shankly, Scottish manager, came and took over the club in the mid-60s and turned them into this powerhouse of just winning lots of titles.
Right.
But also took along. There's this thing that Liverpool have is like the crowd is better than any other places, and they have a stand which is at one end of the field called the Cop, where it's just there's no staggered. It's just from one end to the back, and they have this. There's a footage if you look back in the 60s of this teeming mass of people moving all around, like because it's all standing, singing Beatles songs.
Yeah, right.
Are they waiting for the match to start? And that kind of thing is carried on. That the crowd has more of an effect at Anfield, which is their home stadium, than any other stadiums against opposition, or to bring the home side along, to get the result they wanted and things like that. So all of that wrapped up. And then there's also one final thing is that they've also experienced 2 stadium tragedies. One of them being Hillsborough, which is at Sheffield Wednesday Stadium, but it was for an FA Cup tie. But it wasn't against Sheffield Wednesday. I actually forget who they were playing. 96 people died as a result of crushes. And there was a big thing that it was a cover-up. It was under a Thatcher government. So I should say Thatcher was not really in the 70s, but that kind of underlying class war was always there. A lot of things that came out of Hillsborough were that they covered up what had actually happened, or grand inquests, which I think they call them in England, probably about 5 or 6 years ago, or maybe a bit longer, 10 years ago, said that was all wrong. Like the son So Liverpool supporters have this huge thing of not paying any attention to the Sun, the newspaper, because it published stories, I should say, about Liverpool supporters acting in a way that was like, oh, it was all their fault.
Yeah,
so there's this whole thing of like, oh, you're always the victims. There's this underlying thing from other football fans, oh, you're playing the victim.
Yep.
So there's that, and there's also the Heysel tragedy, which is 1985 European Cup in Belgium, where there was a bit of fighting between fans, or tension between fans, and they had this thing back in the 80s and 70s and 80s. Hooliganism was a thing that was playing out on the terraces of football stadiums, where they would opposing fans would basically have at each other, just fight. Yeah. And you probably would have seen some movies about that, but they had this thing called charging, where they just go, right, we're just going to get them, and they charge across the stands to take on the other fans. And they did that to the Juventus fans, and the Juventus fans tried to escape and climbed a wall that collapsed.
Oh, right.
So a number of fans died during that game as well. So I don't know why that didn't make me want to be a supporter, but like, oh, there's a story here.
There's a history.
There's a history, historical, real story. And so I've been to Anfield, which is one of the best experiences of my life.
Yeah, cool.
Back in 2005, and talking to Jai, one of our other pastors, he went there earlier this year. It was just to share that with him. It was just fantastic. Anyway, that's just my link with football. You make me think. You saying that Freiburg have an attitude of like, well, we're just going to exist. We're going to like be low key and be here for a long time. And German football has a bit of a thing that the fans really dominate, because German clubs must be owned, have a 50+1 rule.
Yeah,
that
so
50% or 51% of the club must be owned by the fans.
Yep.
Or at least the decision making is made by the fans.
Yep.
And there's a club called St. Pauli. I don't know if you've ever heard of them, but their crest is a skull and bones.
Oh, right, no.
However, like they're kind of like this kind of fringe on the edgy club, but they're very socially justice minded as well. An Australian player, Jackson Irvine, actually plays for them. But the thing that I really like about St. Pauli is they have a sausage train, which goes along the grandstand and delivers sausages to fans. And we'll put the link in the show notes. There's actual videos of it.
Yeah, okay.
Anyway,
so you came for that.
You kicked me off on a big long train of
sausage train of thought.
Thoughts on football.
Yeah. So. That was good. I found out the 50+1 rule is really interesting, and it came out, and particularly they talked about. Well, I'm not quite sure. Again, I'm not very deep in German football yet, but
you're getting there. It's good.
Oh, I mean, I have a team. That's
where it starts.
Yeah, but one of the videos I watched was they played. It was some sort of finals match. I don't know which competition against Leipzig, and I think it was
Leipzig. Yeah,
Leipzig.
RB Leipzig.
Yes,
who are owned by Red Bull.
Okay, and the controversy then came out with the 50+1 rule.
Yes,
because they technically are owned by 50+1, but the members at the time of this video was a couple of years old. There were 10 members, all of whom were on the board, and that was it. And you cannot get a membership to Leipzig, and so there's this whole kind of corporate. Oh yeah, we're owned by 50+1% of the members. They just all happen to be board members, and is impossible for any member of the public to become a member.
Yes,
and so
I think they deliberately did that. Obviously.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So there's this whole thing in German football about hating RB Leipzig.
Yes, they are the most hated team.
Yeah, because it goes against the whole ethos.
Yeah.
Of we're owned by the members, we're owned by the people, the populace. Have a huge say in what we do.
And the interesting thing about the Bundesliga too is that they also were one of the latest leagues. Like they call them, there's the big 5 European leagues. So you got England, Spain, France, Germany. Did I miss one? England, France, Spain, Germany, Italy.
Yes,
they're the big 5. But they were the latest out of those 5 to really So there's the kind of story of German unification, which was in the 1850s or 60s, I think, around that time. But then the league didn't unify until the 1950s or 60s.
Oh, right. Okay.
So there's part of that too that kind of plays into that. And also it'd be to do with the Berlin Wall and East Germany, West Germany too.
Yeah.
But even the West German league didn't unify for a very long time. So I think that plays a part, is that we made these efforts to unify, and we're all as fans, and then RB Leipzig says, oh, we're going to trick you.
Yes.
And the other thing is that RB, you think it stands for Red Bull, but it stands for something else.
Yeah, which is deceptive. And the crest is these kind of bulls that are kind of Red Bull bulls, but they happen to be Red Bulls.
Yes.
Yeah,
so that's
a whole big corporate takeover.
Well, that's another thing in you talk about corporate takeovers. There's another thing in football now is multi-club ownership.
Right.
So Red Bull own RB Salzburg as well.
Yes.
They also own the New York Red Bulls in America. But Manchester City also have multiple clubs that they own. I think they own Girona in Spain. I have to check that. They own Yokohama no. What are they called? I've forgotten the name. But this is a new thing now, is that multi-club ownership is becoming a thing and consolidating wealth around certain clubs.
Yeah.
I read an interesting article about that. Is if you've heard about Thomas Piketty, he's read a book about capitalism.
Okay.
But Jonathan Wilson, who's one of my favourite football writers, where I read about all that stuff about the Danubian clubs or Danubian countries in terms of football, wrote an article about can Thomas Piketty save football, and Piketty talks about how capitalism has gone too far with certain things, and he talks about applying that to football, how the wealth just continues to consolidate and has for the last 20 years behind the bigger European clubs.
Yeah.
But I'll link that article in the show notes. But we can move on talking about. I could do the whole podcast on football.
Clearly,
you can see. But you've been reading some books.
I have,
and we thought we might riff off some of these a couple of books that you've been looking at. And you had a book club, which is so cool. Like I wish I could have been a book club.
This is a book club that came out of the conference I went to in Chicago.
Ah, yes.
So it's it's all Americans except for me. So they very kindly do it late in their afternoon.
We'll get the
so that I
RC
can get it in on my morning, which is lovely. And so there are a whole lot of children's ministry people, whether at college level lecturing or being in churches, doing children's ministry. And so we're just reading a book together called...
Oh, it's on screen if you're watching on YouTube.
Yeah.
Oh, can I read it out?
Please.
Children's Ministry and the Spiritual Child.
That's right. So this
Interesting
is...
for a children's minister to be looking at
reading about children's ministry? I know, it's so strange. So the conference I went to, every year they take some of the presentations there and turn them into chapters. So this is the book from the previous conference.
Wow, okay.
That ran in 2022, which was online because it was the weird COVID years.
Of course.
And so it was an online conference that year. So we're just going through these chapters slowly. We just meet once every 3 weeks, just doing slowly running through the chapters. It's really nice because I often would run book clubs or meetings, and when you're in ministry, you do a lot of the leading, and it's rare to be the one just receiving.
Right.
And so, you're organising the service, or you're running the meeting, or you're preaching, or you're leading the children's ministry, and it's and certainly in my role at YouthWorks was running a lot of these types of gatherings together, or networking events, or book clubs, and those kinds of things. And so this is one that I'm not running. I just get to turn up and just get to read the book and be part of the conversation. So there's something really lovely about that, which I'm really enjoying.
Yeah, lovely. Like, it's just nice to be able to have someone to organise.
It's
nice.
And
just say, just turn up.
Yeah, it's nice to do something that I'm not fully organising, because that's rare in the amounts of things that I do, because that's the role of the ministry that I'm in. So
the highlights of, what is it, children's ministry and the
it's a mixed bag of different chapters. Like, they're all radically different to each other because they were all different presentations. So today we were reading together Kids Today Just Can't... ... and it's all about changing our posture and practices to welcome all children. So it's largely about child management, like group management kind of things. Like, what are the behaviours that you find in children that are disruptive? Yeah. Like, what are the challenging behaviours, and how do you best approach and deal with those and the child in your midst? And so it's talking about what's the posture that we can have, and how do we actually prepare ourselves for the children that will come? How do we operate in the room and the space and our teaching and our language, and there's all sorts of really helpful things there.
But is that book taking, rather than an educational pedagogical approach, it's more of a Christian or biblical approach?
Well, they're all Christians who are writing it.
Right.
From a variety of different traditions. So there'll be a whole lot of assumptions built in here. Some are obvious and some are less obvious. There's some I'm probably missing along the way. Every now and then there's little moments that realise, oh yeah, that's right, this person is outside of my tradition. They might just use language that is a little bit different to what I would use, and trying to work out, okay, is that because we have a different understanding of something going on, or are you just using language that's common in your culture or your tradition that not for me?
Yeah. Okay.
So, one of them was just all behaviours communicate. It's our responsibility to seek to understand. This requires a posture of holy curiosity where we welcome children with challenging behaviour. And I just sort of circled holy curiosity. It's like, what does that mean?
Okay.
It's not a language that I would use. Just because you put holy in front of a word doesn't automatically make it Christian. I was like, okay, what are all the assumptions built into that word? And again, I think just for the authors of this chapter, it's probably just something that really naturally flows from their tradition. But it's not natural for my tradition to talk about a holy curiosity. And so I'd love them to unpack that. So they're the kind of things we get to chat about. So this was a really helpful chapter. We talked about a number of different aspects. One of the things I really liked was there's a definition that they pull in from another textbook. What do we mean by challenging behaviour? And the challenging behaviour, they describe patterns of behaviour that do three things. Firstly, interferes with a child's cognitive, social or emotional development. And probably if we're thinking about spirituality, put spiritual development in there. So interferes with their development. Number two, is harmful to that child, other children or adults. And number three, puts a child at high risk for later social problems or failure. Right. So it's good to sort of give a bit of a definition of challenging behaviour. And then just under that, they talk about, this is one of my favourite sentences, our goal is not to simply control children's behaviour, but to join God in calling them into community with God and God's people.
Yes, I like that. Yeah.
So I really like when I can identify, or when they explicitly state the why behind something, because I think that's what my mind naturally draws towards is, okay, so why are we doing this? Let's focus down on what's our purpose here. And so therefore that can help guide all the things that we do, don't do, react, etc.
Yeah, definitely.
And so I thought that was, as a why statement, is really, really helpful. We're not about controlling children's behaviour, but we're joining God in calling them into community with God and God's people. And so as we hold that together with these definition of a challenging behaviour, interfering with development, harmful to themselves or others, or put them at risk for latter social problems or failures, that then helps us to think about, okay, now I've got this child in front of me who is calling out or being disruptive or is making a lot of noise or being cheeky or rude, or like whatever the behaviour is that's in front of me. How do I now think about and articulate the best way to manage this space, whether it be an SRE classroom or a kids ministry room or trying to explain a game or all those kind of different things that happen. How do we do that? Well, keeping those things in mind. So that was part of our conversation this morning.
Yeah, okay. Because controlling behaviour would be the easy option, wouldn't it? And
well, sometimes.
Sometimes. But I think if I can just get that behaviour under control, then I can do what I want to do if I'm teaching or something like that. That's what I'm trying to think is it would be more prudent, as you're saying, to know the why, because then it changes, in its essence, it changes your behaviour as a leader or a teacher in that scenario.
Yeah, absolutely.
I even had a discussion with my son the other day. He was telling me that he likes an approach of one teacher because he feels like he'll be listened to, rather than another teacher who says, no, I don't want to hear it, just get out of where you are, or do it like hearing and reasoning. And it sometimes feels like the why might be missing there, or the why might be maybe not the best approach. So it makes sense that I think about when I coach football with, under 8, 9, 10 and boys, 10-year-old boys, there's a time pressure. because if you're training and they're mucking around, you're like, hey, if we don't have a good training session, then we obviously won't enjoy the game. And maybe sometimes the why is like, oh, what? And I need to take the time to go, why are they behaving? Did they have a bad day? Did there something happen at school? Did they get here late so they were upset about that? Or did they not get ready in time? Like there's all those underlying factors that I wonder if maybe that if we just want to control behaviour, it's because we feel under pressure to get done the thing that we actually want to achieve.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we talk about in education particularly the difference between teaching and learning, which kind of feeds into this as well. Mm-hmm. So if my goal is teaching, then all of that feeds back into this idea that, okay, I create the lesson, I've got a certain amount that I want to communicate, I've got this content that I need to deliver.
Yeah.
And success at the end of a teaching time is I have spoken all of the content that I intended to communicate. Mm-hmm. You flip that to say, no, what's the goal? The goal is learning.
Yes.
If the goal is learning, then actually I don't set the pace, the student sets the pace. And so I've got stuff that I've prepared, I've got stuff that I want to communicate, but I'm constantly in this conversation with the young people that I'm leading, or adult education, but I'm in a conversation with them where I'm constantly assessing, are they hearing what I'm saying? And so I want them to be, the goal is to learn the content, which might mean that I need to stretch the content that I thought would be 1 week over 2 weeks. Or we got through it in 10 minutes instead of 30 and I go, oh, that's really, we've got all this extra time now. And so, but it's child-led, so it's the student-led kind of idea, because I can communicate everything that I prepared and speak that all out, and I can walk out the door and the kids go, I've got no idea what he just said. He talked at us or we did activities, but I've got no idea why we did any of that. And I'm sure you have this conversation with your kids. I have this conversation with my kids all the time. Yeah, talk about it. So what did you do at school today? We talked about this in geography. Okay, what did you learn about that? I don't know. Like I sat there for the whole time and I genuinely have no idea what we're talking about. The concepts just went completely over my head. So, obviously with a class it's hard, but for Zali at that point, it's she did not learn. So the class was not successful for her, regardless of how much content was communicated. Now, when you got more than 2 people in a classroom, particularly when you got 25 or 30, then obviously it's really hard to meet everyone's individual needs at any one time. So that's complicated. But it does help us to think through what we're doing. And so when it comes to children's ministry and we're thinking, okay, no, the biggest aim here is their spiritual development. It's their coming to know Jesus as Lord and Saviour and learning to grow in their knowledge, love and obedience to Him. Then if that's the goal, then I'm going to be shaping obviously the content. And, we talked a couple of weeks ago about me rethinking about curriculum and, those kinds of things. What do I want to help communicate over time to them? But this chapter is all about particularly sort of that group management space. So, the kid who's disruptive or the kid that just sits there and goes, I'm bored, or whatever it is that, how do you address that child? If my biggest aim for you is your growth in the knowledge, love and obedience to King Jesus, therefore, how am I going to behave now? How am I going to act? How am I going to communicate, welcome, all of these kinds of things, and help you and help others to do that? And that's my driving aim, not to just get through the PowerPoint that I prepared to get through the content. Yeah,
and does that open up a lot more opportunity for the relational aspect as well?
I mean, it will have to, yes. Which is also why, I know for our church we talk about long-term, low-key relational discipleship, and that's really key. And that has a big impact on size as well. And this is one of the things I talked about a couple of weeks ago is I'm trying to think for our bigger children's ministries, and by bigger, I mean there's 25 kids in the room. We're not none of our children's ministries are very large. But even if 25 in the room, if it's just me up the front talking at 25, that's one style, but we don't get to do that relational discipleship with one person talking at 25. And so what I'm trying to think through is, okay, how do I break that down to even smaller groups? And so small groups is one of the things I really want to explore. And thinking about, okay, so how do we do a little bit of content delivery, but then lots of small group time? And that way, those 25, if I split those between, say, 4 leaders, we've now got 6 kids for a leader. So now we can break that down even further and have smaller conversations where it's just 6 kids and a leader doing a bit of application and a bit of prayer time, those kinds of things as they think about it. So the relationship is really, really key then. Because you can actually build that, you can listen more. It's hard to take 25 kids' needs into account. It's easier to do 6. It would be even easier to do 3, and it's even easier to do 1, except for the fact that you need more leaders. So leader recruitment then becomes the Achilles heel of that model. So that's going to be it. Another thing is just to think through, okay, how do we actually raise the right number of leaders who can have these kind of discipleship relationships with their kids?
The last question I thought I'd have on this, though, is, as a seasoned children's pastor, what way do you approach teaching and learning with holy curiosity?
I think one of the things I really want to be thinking about is, so many of the principles of our church are built around this, the relational community aspect. And so I want to be able to try and hold in tension there is right content to communicate and there is good community that we are building, and we're oscillating between those two in terms of how do you best grow both of those simultaneously at the same time. I had a conversation with another friend yesterday, and she is a consultant for a Methodist denomination over in America. And we were talking about a whole lot of things. She had said something at this last conference in Chicago about third place, and didn't really know too much about it, but she was exploring it. And she worked at Starbucks, and Starbucks had this whole big third place. They use
third place theories,
They want their coffee shops to be third places. And so she came out of that and she mentioned this conference, I've got this idea, I'm thinking about what does it look like. So after the conference, I emailed her the chapter that I've written on this, and I said, actually, this is, I grew up in this because Stuart Crawshaw, this was his big theory, was grassroots movement theory and third place sociology, and what would it look like for a church to be a third place? And we're trying to do the same thing. We're trying to do this children's ministry as a third place. What does that look like? So we had this hour-long conversation yesterday, and I was explaining my context, she was explaining her context, and we were talking about how at Soul Revival, one of the things is we have this teaching time and content moment where we're reading the Bible, praying together, singing songs, doing memory verses, we're doing all of those kinds of things. But the chill time is really key as well. So I was trying to explain chill time to her, and she thought, this is really fascinating. Like, what does that look like? And I was trying to explain it. And and I think that is, to answer your question, I can't remember what it was, holy curiosity. This is I'm looking out in both of those times. I'm trying to grow the kids to know and love Jesus in community. And it's having both of those together. And that's why I'm really curious about the way that kids develop in community. Because I think for a lot of us who are more evangelical and reformed, that we're very good at content delivery, and we're not as strong on the relational community building. And so that's one of the things I'm really curious of. And it's what people who notice who come to our church, sometimes from other churches, or have not been at a church for a while, but they're coming back and they say, your church is really different. What is it? Like, I'm trying to put my finger on what's different about the way you do church. Because if you just came for our gathering, service time, it's pretty much identical to most, Anglican churches all throughout Sydney. You can go to 6 other churches within a stone's throw of our church and get a very similar service. But they notice but something feels different. What is it? I can't put my finger on it. They say, well, it's the before and after time. It's the fact that there's a meal connected with everything. It's these relaxed relational discipleship. That's what you're noticing. So you're trying to help them, give them language to it. We go, oh, that's what it is. That's really attractive. I really like that. And that's what I noticed about the children is they really like church. They really want to be here. And that's great because you've got this emotional, affective connection to the church. And in that church is where they are loved by disciples of Jesus. And those disciples of Jesus are helping them to see and understand Jesus and to grow in their knowledge, love and obedience to him. And so, building the social aspect along with the content aspect together, that's where I think the magic happens. So that they're learning about Jesus from a community that loves them and that they know they belong to. And so that's the bit that I'm always curious about. So I'm curious about, do they want to be at church? Why do they want to be at church? What are they appreciating about church? And sort of hold those in balance.
I completely agree with you that my children don't like missing church, for example.
That's great, yeah.
And it's because of the relational aspect, but they also get older, just even older children to be part of their relationship. They see them, they want to grow up to be them. There's all that influence too. And something that you and I have been talking about is that something that I've experienced in the last couple of years is adults coming to church because of the children's ministry, but not because it's good for them, but because their children want to keep going to it. Yes, and I think that's an emerging thing that I haven't seen before. So I'm just interested to see how that keeps happening and what God's going to do through that.
Yeah.
Well.
Yep. And it's easier to fall into an attractional model when you try and do that. And we've talked about this before.
I don't think it is attractional.
No.
It's the relational part is attractive.
Yes, it's attractive, not attractional.
Yeah.
So attractional is I'm trying to run the funnest thing for a kid to do on a Sunday morning, Saturday night, Friday night. And I'm hoping that I'm cooler than the park across the road.
Yep.
So that's attractional.
Yeah, with like a Nerf war or
those kinds of things. And so, but that you're always chasing fun and you're always chasing how can I make this the best hour of a kid's week by the activities that we do. And Jesus becomes a bit of an add-on to the side.
This is the bait and switch thing that we've talked about
it's the bait and switch.
Even with youth ministry, same thing with children's ministry. Yeah.
Run a band night and you get all these teenagers turn up because they want to hear a band play, and then right at the end you say, "Oh, actually, can I just take 2 minutes to tell you about Jesus?"
By the way, Jesus, yeah.
By the way, Jesus, and it's like, "Oh no, I came here for a band," and so you have the kids like, "No, I came here for a Nerf night." So, oh yes, but before that, can we spend 20 minutes talking about Jesus? Why? I came here for a Nerf night, and you either have to sacrifice the amount of content that you can do, or the seriousness with which you can take the Bible, or you run the risk of actually not being more interesting than the park, because at least the park I can play basketball without being told about Jesus.
Right.
And so, a relational model, which is attractive, is here's a community of people who accept me, who love me, who welcome me. I feel known and loved here. This is really curious. And these people who know, love, and seem to genuinely care about me keep talking about Jesus. What's with that? I'm curious that Jesus seems to be the thing that ties all of these people together. Both the peers that are my age that love coming here, and these adults who seem to really love and appreciate me as well and miss me when I'm not here. And so slowly over time, this long-term, it's low-key, it's relational, but you're building up in their mind this connection between love, acceptance, welcome, and Jesus, and saying, yes, actually it's because of Jesus that we have this attitude. Jesus also welcomes you.
And Jesus is attractive.
And Jesus is attractive, not because he's the coolest thing to do, but because he actually fulfills the deepest longings and needs that we have, and even that our children have.
Yep. Fantastic way to put that, I think. Your second book, though, should we move on to the second one?
You're welcome to.
And it's called do you want to hold it up for the camera there?
Yes, I can.
It's called The Scandal of the Evangelical Mind. Goodness me, that's very scandalous.
It is a bit scandalous, and it's a 20-something-year-old book. What's the publication date? 1994. It came out. So it's as ancient as you are, Joel.
Gee whiz, you're older than me. Come on, man. I mean, how old I would have been 8.
There you go.
8 in 1994.
I would have been 12.
So 4 years older than me.
Ed, I've been wanting to read it for a while because it keeps getting referred to. It's one of these sort of classics.
Yeah, it's one of like, you've got to read this one.
Yeah. And it starts by, the scandal of the evangelical mind is that there is not much of an evangelical mind.
Ooh. Is that the opening line?
That is the opening line.
Wow. Not even, is it that forward or it's the...
This is there is no forward. 1. There's no preface.
Wow.
Oh, no, there is a bit of a preface. But that's just chapter 1, boom, straight
opening line, wow. What does he mean?
So here's what he's talking about. He is...
Sorry, the author is Mark Noll.
The author is Mark A. Noll. He's...
Mark Noll.
I'm sure
sorry,
he's never heard that one before.
Yeah.
He is a very well respected Christian church historian, and done lots of really good, really excellent church history kind of stuff. And I'm almost about 2/3 through. His big premise is that, particularly from his vantage point in the early 90s, that evangelicals have done a great job at particular spheres, and so they've there's a lot of big churches, there's a lot of evangelism, there are media companies, there's television, but it's all within this kind of evangelical ecosystem. And he says what we don't see is a lot of evangelical thought leadership in all the other aspects of life. Where are the evangelicals who are doing the hard work in science, in business, in astronomy, in microbiology, in those kinds of... So he's looking out at the sort of the academy, I suppose, and saying, why aren't there significant evangelical thought leadership happening here that are integrating a rich gospel understanding of the Bible and a thorough commitment to Jesus Christ and a really robust engagement with the academic life and the scientific life and the social scientific life. And
wow.
So he's saying there's not a lot of this overlap here between evangelicals. There's not Christians in those spaces, and he's really focused on the evangelical church, but he will along the way he's kind of noticed, there's Catholic thinking here. There's a lot of strong Catholic thinking on some of these things, but there doesn't seem to be much in the Protestant evangelical world. Why is this? And so he then tracks history. So he's a historian primarily, and he's looking at some of the stuff that we've talked about a number of seasons ago. He talks about the fundamentalism, revivalism, talks about all these kind of bits and pieces. And one of the really interesting things that I've noticed, or what I really appreciated, was he said there were a number of different movements in Enlightenment thinking.
Oh, yeah.
And one of them, he talks about this Scottish Enlightenment. I'm probably going to butcher all this because I've only just, I've been smashing this through during the week. But he talks about the Scottish Enlightenment had a big emphasis on common sense.
Okay.
And so we know things by common sense. And that kind of is one of the pieces that kind of filters into this American Protestantism and American evangelicalism, along with revivalism. And so this taking personal faith in Jesus, and it's very experiential. He talks about the rise of Pentecostalism and holiness movements and emphasis on Holy Spirit, and all of these kind of things play into a world where we take Jesus very seriously, but not very seriously in the evangelical world, a robust engagement with the academics.
Wow, okay.
And so part of it is, the tie-in with the Enlightenment common sense idea is that if the Bible is to be understood and if Jesus is to be known, then I can experience that just me and the Bible by myself. And so I don't need an academic understanding. And he even quotes this one guy who wrote a commentary on the Bible, and he prided himself on the fact that he had read no other commentaries and had done no formal study, and that this was a significant advantage because it was just him and the Bible, and therefore he wasn't polluted by all of this academic stuff that was happening over on the side.
Rubbish.
And so he was able to more purely articulate what was in the Bible because he was free from academic study. And this is a kind of extreme case perhaps, but he's noticing these trends in evangelicalism. And he talks about politics, he talks about science, and talked about how when a lot of the Enlightenment stuff, it kind of fractures off the different parts of the Christian world. So we talked about it when we talked about the fundamentalist conspiracy, was it liberal fundamentalist split? The Scopes monkey trial is the sort of the classic example of this, where, can we teach evolution in schools? And it was seemingly you had this choice between you either go with science and therefore reject the Bible, or you go with the Bible and therefore reject science. So he picks up some of those things as well. He says this was part of in this atmosphere, but it was enhanced by all these other things like the dependency on common sense, dependency on the Holy Spirit, dependency on sort of revivalism, that it's just about you and your personal relationship with Jesus is the really key thing. And so evangelicals have largely left the establishment, the academic establishment. And so there's not a lot of robust thinking going on there. So yeah, that's kind of what he's talking about. It's fascinating to think the way through.
Does he provide any solutions?
I haven't got
the
there
book
yet.
is, as you said, it's 20 years old. It's interesting that he's saying that something like the Scopes monkey trial led to, especially in Christian circles in the US, of you're science or you're not science. So that's led to a whole lot of Christians not even engaging in the areas that he's saying they should be engaging in.
Yes, yeah. I mean, he did say that the Scopes monkey trial is a bit overplayed in history, and he said it's really just one example of many of much larger trends, and that's what he's interested in. He's interested in these big trends through. Chapter 8, which I've not yet got to yet, is called "Is an Evangelical Intellectual Renaissance Underway?" So maybe there's some hope.
Do you agree with that? I mean, it's like I say, it's 20 years ago. You might have your own perspective on that.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think there are people who are evangelical Christians who are in significant spaces. I think there's been interesting growth in Christians in philosophy. And so William Lane Craig is one who is an apologist, but he's a philosophy professor. So he's in that world. So there seem to be more and more impacting different spaces like that. The other thing he talked about recently in the bit I read a little bit this morning was if there are Christians in these spaces, they often bracket them off. So I'm a Christian over here and I might be a scientist, but I don't connect those two, or I don't think the big thoughts about how does an understanding of God, Jesus, the world, impact my understanding and relationship to science and those kinds of things. So that's really interesting. So have there been changes? In the books I've really appreciated recently, we talked about Christopher Watkins' biblical criticism. Yep. I think he does a great job in this space. I mean, he's a philosophy professor, but he teaches, actually, is he a state university or is that a seminary? I can't remember now.
I thought he's in Melbourne, isn't he?
He is in Melbourne, yeah. I'm just trying to remember if he's in a Christian institution or a non-Christian or a secular institution. Mm-hmm. But I think biblical criticism, what is it? Critical
theory.
Critical biblical theory.
Yep.
Or biblical critical theory. Yeah. People know which
BCT.
one. Christopher Watkins, yes. I think what that does really well is give a evangelical Christian integration into these things. How do we actually think theologically about these massive trends? So, yeah, I mean, I can sort of identify a few people who are in that space. Mm-hmm. So maybe things have picked up.
He's at Monash University, I think.
Right, okay, yeah. So he is in the political department.
He also lectures
philosophy
and
department.
researches French studies at Monash.
Yeah, he's mostly a French philosophy guy.
Wow, and then he wrote that huge book on biblical critical
Just in
theory.
his spare time.
Goodness me.
Yeah. He's a bit of a brain.
Yeah, it's a bit of a floating brain in a tank.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah, right.
Anyway, so I've been enjoying that understanding of evangelicalism.
It feels like it's piquing your interest and how you're thinking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do. I don't think this is completely related, but as I've said before, I've been served a lot of skateboarding videos, and that started off with us saying that Cordano Russell, Canadian skateboarder, is a Christian. But as I recently found that a couple other skateboarders are Christians.
Okay.
And I think it's an interesting way. You're talking about integrating faith with your vocation and whatever it is. And there seems to be, I think, maybe Christians are being, maybe intentionally or unintentionally, becoming a bit more nuanced with that, because we're now realizing something that Stu talked about on our episode about the Last Supper reenactment that they did at the Paris Olympics, was that we're not in the minority. We're not in the majority. That's what I meant to say. Well, Christians have been used to being in the majority. And even when we talked about faith for exiles, we're used to being in the majority because a Christian worldview was, dominated the West. That's changing a lot now. So I wonder if it's forcing us to become better at integrating those things rather than just being a smack you over the head kind of approach. I don't know if that's true or not. I mean, there's probably people that have done it a lot better than others, but I'm just wondering if that is because of that post-Christendom thing, it's forcing us to become much more nuanced and better at how we explain the gospel within those contexts.
Yeah, I hope so. And I think this is where the stuff from Faith for Exiles, that idea of resilient discipleship, comes in as well. That the resilient disciple is someone who is not just being at church because that's the right thing to do or the good thing to do.
Or even just hiding at church.
Or hiding at church. Or even it's just a good routine. But you're going to church as a strong matter of conviction and a deep understanding this is what I do, and even when it's hard, and you have a understanding of yourself in which this makes sense, that this is what you're doing. And I think again that as the West becomes more and more secularized and Christianity is more and more weird and unusual, that helps solidify those who do it, because there's no longer any social privilege in being a Christian. It's actually now a social detriment to be a Christian. And so that sort of weeds out, I suppose, those who will get distracted by the other things. And Jesus talks about the four soils.
Yes.
And there's those who whose roots are shallow and either dry up, or who are choked out by the weeds and the concerns of this world. And is it that in an increasingly secular society that those concerns will be more and more what takes people away from church? And you're left with the number of resilient disciples as a percentage of church increase, even if the churches themselves continue to decrease in number. And the extreme case of this, of course, are the countries where Christianity is under persecution, where it's illegal or otherwise to be a Christian. And if the only way of meeting as a Christian is undercover, in darkness, secret locations, you have to be a resilient disciple to bother. You've got to be thoroughly convicted that Jesus is Lord, even Lord over this oppressive government and an oppressive structure that may actually arrest me if they find out what I'm doing and how I'm spending my time. But I've got a high view of Jesus as King. And so I imagine that there's not many, casual Christians in the persecuted church.
Right. Yeah.
And while I don't wish for persecution, I think that God wants us to live in free societies, and that's a good thing. Democracy is a great thing that Christendom has brought about.
Yes.
But nevertheless, the irony of God's kingdom is that it often grows under persecution, and strength and resilience sometimes come through hardship.
I think they all, not sometimes. I think it's definitely where it comes from.
Yeah. Which makes sense of, who we are. We talked, was it last week, week before, you were talking about watching the skating videos where you show the hundreds and hundreds of times.
The fails.
To get there. They're working through hardship in order to get to the result. And I think, part of how God's created us as humans, is that's part of our makeup.
I think great place to finish. Finally get that out. But thank you as always.
No worries.
I love the conversations that we have.
Yeah.
There's been very wide ranging all over the place. We talk about football, sausage trains at football stadiums, children's ministry,
and
Scandalous Evangelical Minds. Maybe that'll be the title of the podcast, just to pinch it off the. It's quite a clever title actually to get people to pick it up.
Maybe I've digested it more next week, and I'll have some more thoughts. I don't know.
That'd be good.
Yeah.
Until next week, Tim. Thank you. Until next week, everyone listening and watching. Thank you very much. Chuck a comment on the YouTube channel. It seems to get our videos out there more, which would be awesome. And my name's been Joel, if you didn't know, because I don't think I introduced myself at the start of the episode. But thank you very much for watching and or listening, and we'll see you next week. And we'll finish with a one way.
One way.